Hello guys and gals, my name is Jack Bolin, aka the Gameboy, and I would like to welcome you to the Mr. Worldly Wiseman editorial. Now y'all might be wondering, who is this kid? Why the heck is he talking to me? I am a conservative, Southern Baptist, white boy, who is now an elder's kid apparently, surprise surprise, and may or may not go to the same church as my boss got sours. Now why am I here? Just to suffer? Yes and no. I am here to do what everyone loves, reviewing video games, while also analyzing Christianity within it. And have you ever wondered what an evil Mickey Mouse would be like? Well, look no further than to Bendy the Demon. That's right, today we are talking about the wannabe FNAF, Bendy and the Dark Revival. Why aren't we talking about Ink Machine? Because it sucks, that's why. In all honesty, we are just, Dark Revival's the one with the story, and Ink Machine is not, and yeah, so let's just move on, shall we? We start out our story with a letter addressed to Henry Stein, an ex-animator for Joey Drew Studios, inviting him back to the old studio by the man himself, telling him he has something to show him. Henry enters the old studio and finds it completely empty, not a single person in sight. He explores around until he finds what Joey had been wanting to show him. In this warehouse section of the studio houses a machine suspended in the air by 4 metal chains, and Henry, being the idiot he is, decides to, instead of leaving, decides to turn on the machine and then unleashes an entity known as the Ink Demon. He runs to the exit but ends up falling through the floor and into a lower level of the studio. Get ready to hear that a lot throughout this summary. He then drains a few stairwells of ink and finds himself in a room with a pentagram on the floor and then proceeds to pass out. He then wakes up hours later, setting up Chapter 2, and begins to search for a way out of the studio. As he searches, he finds a man walking by a doorway. He calls out to him, but the man keeps mumbling to himself, moving out of view. He reaches the end of the hallway, but the man is gone. In his place, a cardboard cutout of Bendy. But we shrug it off and press on. We find ourselves in the music department of the studio and find a stairwell flooded, blocking our way out of here. And I just have to say, why the heck can we not just go down there and leave? We are fully capable of reaching the door, but no. We have to go on this stupid fetch quest to get a stupid valve to drain the stupid ink. Anyway, back to the summary. After this fetch quest, we drain the stairwell of ink, and of course, before we can reach the door to freedom, we are smacked in the head by the man we saw earlier and wake up to find ourselves tied up with the man standing in front of us. We learn that this man is Sammy Lawrence, the songwriter at Joey Drew Studios, and he has brought us here as a peace offering to the Ink Demon.
Oh yay! I'm a sacrifice!
But instead of taking us, Bendy ends up taking Sammy instead, killing him. And this, kids, is why you don't worship demons. Matthew 4:10. You must worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Henry frees himself and flees from the demon's wrath, buying himself some more time. And before Henry has a chance to waste even more of our time, he is found by the best character in the game, Boris the Wolf. Boris allows Henry to stay with him in his bunker, setting up Chapter 3. We begin Chapter 3 with Henry waking up from his nap and bribing Boris with some bacon soup in exchange for the door handle to the safe house. We set out on yet another meaningless adventure and find ourselves in my favorite section of the game, the Heavenly Toys Workshop. Small little rant before we move on. I actually really like Chapter 3. Sure, it's the longest one in the game, but it feels fun to play. Bendy is a threat to you this entire chapter, enemies are waiting for you at every corner, and there's actual tense moments in the game like level 14. So yeah, that's my small little rant of why Chapter 3 is better than all of Ink Machine. But anyway, they end up finding the final member of the Bendy trio, Alice Angel. And the only thing I have to say about this is, Exodus 24, you must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. She decides to make a deal with us that in exchange for our freedom, we do some chores for her. And because Henry is desperate, he decides to help her, and after he finishes her little shopping list, he is betrayed and, say it with me now, falls lower into the studio. Chapter 4. We set out in search of Boris because Miss Perfectionist over here stole him from us and wants to use him for parts. Finally! A goal I can actually get behind.
Boris.
Frick! Yup. All that work. Down the drain. Alright. Vengeance plot for next chapter. I'm down. Can we move on, please? Chapter 5, the last chapter of Ink Machine and probably the most underwhelming one at best. Like, this chapter is a mess. They have this one section in there that they thought would be this really cool climactic fight scene with Alice and Tom fighting alongside you against all the enemies fought in the previous 4 chapters, but no. I hate this section with a passion. And you want to guess how this game ends? You place a film reel with the words "The End" on it into a projector, show it to Bendy, and he just freaking dies. Like, I get what you were going for, but why? There was such a better way to execute that ending. We also find Joey Drew and learn that we're in an endless loop, forced to play this game over and over again, so... yay. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Bendy and the Dark Revival. The game that made a good chunk of the Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach fans nervous. This game took what was good from Ink Machine and just expanded upon it. You know all those things I said I liked in Chapter 3? Well, these things are present in every single chapter. The Ink Demon and his minions are always a threat to you, the story is miles better than the first game, and the art style is top tier. This game has potential to be on the list of games that can compete with Spider-Verse.
Okay, his opinion is not representative of mine. Okay, that's his, not mine.
Yeah, sure, it still has its problems, but man, this game puts 90% of indie horror games to shame. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Dark Revival takes place 30 years after the first game, and believe it or not, but our protagonist doesn't suck in this one. We play as Audrey, an animator for Archgate Pictures, the company that bought out Joey Drew Studios after the death of the man himself. Audrey decides to take a quick coffee break and runs into Wilson, the very obvious antagonist of the game. We ride an elevator down, and the two end up in this little museum section of the building, and Wilson lures Audrey to the ink machine, where he plunges us back into the world made of ink. Audrey awakens and finds that she has been transformed by the ink into yet another poor, unfortunate soul trapped within the machine's inky walls. She traverses through the halls of the abandoned studio and immediately finds that she isn't exactly safe here. Remnants of the demon's carnage lingers throughout the studio, and the Butcher Gang are roaming the halls looking for more victims. We enter the Heavenly Toys workshop and have our first encounter with one of the Butcher Gang members. Audrey hides in one of the miracle stations, and the creature is startled away by the sound of a woman humming. We exit our hiding spot and bump into Alice and Angel, the good version of Miss Perfectionist. She explains the rules of this world to us before heading off and leaving us to finally start an adventure as Chapter 1 begins. In Chapter 1, we heed Allison's advice and begin to head to the upper levels of the studio, while also looking for a way out. We encounter more of the members of the Butcher Gang, and we also get our introduction to the Lost Ones. We stumble across one of these Lost Ones, pinned to the wall, a bag over his head, and a gent pipe driven into his stomach, the words "Demon Follower" written on the wall beside him. We then proceed to borrow the gent pipe from him, allowing us to move forward. Soon after this, we are forced to wade across a pool of ink, and when we're not even a foot away from dry land, the ink begins to call out to Audrey. The ink gives Audrey the gift to banish any inky creature from this realm and back into the abyss to be reborn by the machine. After that, we go through this museum-like room and head down into a cellar which holds a perfect version of Bendy himself. We open the cage and try to make friends with him, but we end up zapping him by accident and he runs off because women are kinda scary. We follow him and end up finding someone else though. The Ink Demon makes his return, taking on a more advanced form, and he begins to speak to Audrey. He stalks her down and she barely makes her escape, slamming a door on him, buying her only a few seconds. Chapter 2 begins right after this encounter, the demon stalking us everywhere we go from here on out. We find ourselves in the Animator's Lounge and begin to collect drawings so Dingus over here will let us pass. We collect all the drawings while Bendy gives us his evil villain monologue and are allowed to pass on into the next area. We enter a theater, do a puzzle, free a fourth member of the Butcher Gang, meet a new companion, get a new ability, and then we finally enter our main area of the chapter, the Artist's Rest. In this room, we learn that Joey would work these artists well past their bedtimes so that they would only get maximum 2 hours of sleep, something I'm sure Scott understands all too well. So Joey made this lounge for them so that they would never had to leave the building. But the workers had other plans, throwing raves, having orgies, and just dancing the night away. Yeah, note to self, don't work for Joey Drew. But we also learn more about Wilson and Archgate Pictures, how the studio was doing after buying out Bendy, and how Wilson gained control of this crooked empire. We make our way to an elevator, avoiding the demon's advance, but surprise, surprise, we are blocked off from going that way, so we end up in another part of the studio, setting up Chapter 3. Chapter 3, we continue to find a way to the upper levels of the studio, entering an elevator that Bendy was using to snack on a lost one, but is hijacked by a creature only known as the Keeper, and we fall into, you guessed it, a lower part of the studio. We find ourselves in a sewer and meet a familiar face. Just like he did to everyone else, Joey Drew placed his soul into the machine and is now a ghost-like figure within the studio. He beckons Audrey to follow him, and he explains exactly what this realm is.
Mr. Drew?
Joey, please.
Joey, what is this place? The studio? These monsters? Am I dreaming?
It's a cycle, Audrey. An ink-stained nightmare, forever stuck on repeat. With just a pencil and a dream, and with a little help from the Gent Corporation, it came into being. From what I gather, it exists in parallel with the outside world, but completely removed from the march of time. And like a record played over and over again, it's begun to crumble, wear down. This studio is a monument to choosing the wrong road. Now, whether it was built for revenge or regret, I don't know. That's my riddle to solve.
After we talk with Joey, we set out once again and end up in the Kingdom of Amok. Don't ask, this is basically a glorified lost one who lost his marbles. We end up killing him and becoming the new Amok, and continue on. We enter a subway station and end up finding this fully functional city, and another familiar face. The perfect Bendy is there, and before he gets a chance to run away again, we manage to talk with him, and he ends up joining us for Chapter 4. Chapter 4, my favorite in terms of looks. I absolutely adore how the city looks, and this is my second favorite section within a Bendy game. We travel the city looking for the old Gent building to Bendy's discomfort, and we get another conversation between Joey and Audrey, this time with some new lore.
It was then Joey decided to make something new. Something he had always wanted, but he could never have. A family. But not a cartoon one. Something real. And after many, many tries, he created something that made him happier than he ever could have imagined. A wonderful, loving daughter. Bright, kind, almost human. He created you, Audrey.
That's right, Papa Joey pulled a Vader and reveals that Audrey is his daughter created from the ink machine. When we return to the city, Bendy is gone, but we got the keycard that we needed, so I call that the win. We head over to the Gent building and enter it only to be confronted by the ink demon. Radio towers start to go off, messing with both Audrey and Bendy. Audrey loses the ability to banish people and teleport, and Bendy shrinks down into his perfect form, which we later find out is a prison for him, crushing his body into that tiny imp. He walks off, and we are forced to press on into the building. We explore the building, avoiding keepers that are wandering around the halls looking for you. We learn a few more secrets and end up in a room called the Pit, a containment unit for people who have broken or reset the cycle. Henry is here too, and we can talk to him, but I'm just gonna move on. We are eventually caught by a keeper and wake up in a train, Wilson sitting in front of us, setting up the grand finale. Chapter 5, the last chapter for our summary, and definitely the better final one. Wilson explains that he brought us here to help him execute the ink demon once and for all, and set the loop free. We agree and are let into Wilson's manor, where we meet Betty, his assistant. She takes us to our room and lets us take a well-deserved nap. Unfortunately, Miss Perfectionist is back and kidnaps us to play tea party. We wake up in an electric chair.
The electric chair?
And Ugo explains that she kidnapped us because we're, quote, unique. Look, lady, you clearly did not do your research on me because there is nothing unique about me. I'm kind of a disappointment, actually. But we end up escaping her, and finally, we are given the chance to exact our revenge for what she did to Boris. Really? We recruit Allison and Tom after this encounter and head back to Wilson. We meet up with him in his lab, and he explains that to kill Bendy, there must be a new deity in his place, which is why he brought Audrey here. He tries to force Audrey to become the new leader of the studio, but she says screw that, and ends up killing Wilson in the same contraption he was trying to kill her in. We then find the machine of the Ink Realm, and a boss fight takes place. We end Wilson once and for all, but the creature he was piloting rips off our legs and almost kills us, until Bendy comes in and saves us. He tells her to merge with him, and she agrees, but Papa Drew tells her that she's being stupid before being killed by Bendy. Audrey takes control of the body and begins to head to a projector to put the film reel and reset the loop, which is a much better ending sequence than what they did for Ink Machine. Audrey resets the loop and pretty much just becomes the new leader of the Ink Realm by default, taking Bendy back with her into the real world, the game closing with the Gent Corporation coming in and taking away the Ink Machine. So yeah, Dark Revival, 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Ink Machine, not so much. Like, sure, it's got its moments, but overall, it's a really boring game to play. Though, I will admit, this game does hold somewhat of a special place in my heart because it's really the only happy memories I have as a child. Which is kind of depressing now that I say it out loud. But anyway, moving on. Dark Revival's amazing. The combat is still wonky, but overall, it was really fun to play, and if you feel up to it, I would highly recommend it. Like I said before, the art style is amazing, the story is really solid, and if you like being chased by bootleg Disney characters, this is the game for you. I also really appreciate that this game didn't go down the lore chaser road like Ink Machine did. It was really refreshing being able to play a game that was really well polished and didn't crash every 5 seconds. Because ever since Five Nights at Freddy's, indie games have just always seemed to chase the game theory videos instead of actually making a good game for their fans to enjoy.
Must like that kind of stuff. Hit me up.
Watch the camera not even pick up what the hoodie says. So I'm glad they got to redeem themselves with Dark Revival. Also, don't think I'm letting Poppy Playtime off the hook. Sure, people say, oh, the game's good now. The game was good all the way back when it first released. I don't buy that crap. Fix your game and we'll talk. You have potential, don't freaking waste it. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for this section. I'm going to look at 6 characters and show you ultimately what was their downfall. So first we'll look at Joey, then Alice, then Sammy, then Bendy, and then Henry and Audrey. And then hopefully I won't fail at wrapping this all up. Okay, Mr. Drew. This character is obsessed with the idea of bringing his cartoon creations to life using his machine. This character in a way plays God when it comes to this world born from the machine. Joey, for 30 years, tormented an inky version of his old business partner, Henry, just because he felt betrayed by him when he left the company to spend time with his wife. He even goes as far as to make a daughter for himself from the machine. This machine to him has basically become a god to Joey, using it to fulfill all of his desires. Joey was a man who was so eager to fulfill his own desires that they ended up being his downfall. Next up is Alice Angel, aka Susie Campbell. Now, Susie was the voice actress for Alice Angel before being replaced by Allison Pendle. But before this, she adored Alice, feeling like this character was truly a part of her at times, even claiming that she was her at points. So when she got fired, she was devastated. Little did she know that this was Joey's plan all along, using her soul to create Alice from the ink machine. She was so obsessed with Alice that she was willing to kill herself just to become this character. Next we have Sammy Lawrence. This character went mad writing songs for the Bendy cartoons, essentially, that he eventually started to see and hear Bendy everywhere, beginning to worship him. And once he enters the ink realm, that worship only grows, offering sacrifices so that the ink demon would free him from his inky form, which led to his demise by the hand of the very being that he gave his praises to. Again, why we don't worship demons. And speaking of demons, finally we have the ruler of the ink himself, Bendy the Little Devil Darling. Now Bendy is another one of Joey's inky creations, and is actually the first one ever created. He was created without a soul, which meant he was just a mindless beast roaming the halls of the studio, killing anything that got in his path. So Joey traps him in the ink realm for him to dominate and rule over. Bendy is just another creature made from human insanity and our desperation to be our own gods. That's the game's whole message. Believe what you want to believe. That's literally Audrey's first line within Dark Revival. Both of our protagonists start off with the goal of leaving, but in the end, they end up consumed with the idea of controlling this world essentially, becoming the gods of this world. These games tell you to make yourself an idol. It tells you to take control of your destiny, that you can become your own gods. Audrey at the end of the game literally bonds with the ink demon at the end of the game and works with him moving forward, while Henry and Ink Machine kept resetting the loop for a different outcome. Everything that takes place in both Ink Machine and Dark Revival is just one big example of how far we as humans have fallen. All of these characters all show us in some way that humans would rather worship demons instead of our creator. John 3:19. And the judgment is based on this fact. God's light came into the world, but the people loved the darkness more than the light, for their actions were evil. We love our sins so much that we are willing to pretty much kill ourselves just for an ounce of earthly pleasure. We as humans prioritize the god of money, pleasure, drunkenness, and gluttonous, instead of the God who made the heavens and the earth. The God who, hundreds of years ago, rescued our ancestors from the Egyptians, and the God who sent his son to die for you, so that we might have life and life more abundant. Colossians 3:5. So put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy. for a greedy person is an idolater, worshipping the things of this world. Idolatry is a dangerous thing to fall into, as is every sin. Now, as Christians, we're lucky, because we are given eyes and ears by our Lord to see and realize that these things are sin. But the unbelievers are still blind and deaf. Their hearts still hard and they even go out of their way to hide from God, even though they can't. Which is why we need to continue to preach to these people so that one day if they're called, they will receive new hearts and their eyes will be opened and their ears will hear. But circling back around to idolatry, this is a sin that Christians since the dawn of time basically have fallen into. Christians today, and even back in biblical times, are becoming obsessed with the things of this world. Today, kids are playing video games 24/7, and teens and adults are partying, having immoral sex, and doing drugs. Romans 13 verses 13 to 14. Because we belong to the day, we must live decent lives for all to see. Don't participate in the darkness of wild parties and drunkenness, or in sexual promiscuity and immoral living, or in the quarreling and jealousy. Instead, clothe yourselves with the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, and don't let yourselves think about ways to indulge your evil desires. Now, I'm not saying that we as Christians can't enjoy video games and TV shows, or that we can't crack open a bottle of wine and hang out with friends.
We may be Baptists, but we're Reformed Baptists.
I'm saying that we shouldn't let ourselves be overtaken by them. Now, there are things that we are not allowed to do, like having sex before marriage, getting drunk, participating in homosexual relationships. But as long as we turn our brains on and closely follow God's instructions, we should be good. And to close it off here, I know idolatry is hard. Believe me, I struggle with it too. And so does everyone else. You're not alone in that. But as long as we all continue to obey God's law and read and meditate on Scripture, eventually our goals and our desires will start to align with Christ's, and we'll find that we already have enough through Him, and we won't want anything else. Thank you all for putting up with me today. I know it can kind of be a handful sometimes, but before you leave, why not share this video with your friends? We want to get these messages to as many people as we can. And before you leave also, why not like, comment, subscribe, and speaking of comments, write potatoes, or I will come and find you.
No, you won't. Yes, I will.
I've been the Gameboy, and I'll see you later. Peace.